Hi, I'm Sonya White Jaguar. This is a special inside look at the making of writing Alan Rickman's autobiography, a fan fiction romance. Just as a woman gardener didn't exist in the time of King Louis XIV, as depicted in the film A Little Chaos, there was, of course, no ghostwriter romantically involved with Alan Rickman who was writing his autobiography at the end of his life. Inspiration for this fan fiction love story came to me around the time when Alan's diaries were published. In the introduction of my free book, Alan Rickman on Love, a Channeled Commentary, I explained that Alan loves romances, and he had asked me to write love stories. He knows that romance novels, Hallmark movies, and love songs are very popular. However, I had never written a romance novel, so I told Alan I needed to study the romance genre and practice developing my own style. He then graciously allowed me to write a short love story loosely based on his life, both as a creative exercise and as a gift to his fans. The story that became writing Alan Rickman's autobiography is as much an exploration of elements common to love stories as it is a bit of a satire of the romance genre, all in good fun. To achieve the most dramatic effect, I took some creative license with Alan's life to establish a romantic setting. Since Alan was a charismatic theatrical performer in this life, I wanted the story's atmosphere to reflect a sense of theatrical flair. One of the starting points for the piece was a vision I received of Alan and the ghostwriter sitting side by side on the edge of a hot tub, their feet dangling in the water. I had no idea what the couple was talking about or at what point in the story that scene would take place. Later, I received more content during a series of channeling sessions and visions that I recorded with no judgments or interpretations. Alan and I collaborated throughout the process, sharing ideas and writing some text together. The fictionalized Alan and the unnamed ghostwriter were developed and shaped by both of us. Details about the ghostwriter were left vague to make Alan the primary focus and to allow readers to imagine themselves in the narrator's place. Afterward, I rearranged and edited the disparate passages, fitting them together like a jigsaw puzzle to create a story that flowed from one chapter to the next. The writing process gave me a wonderful opportunity to strengthen my channeling ability and co-write a work of fiction with someone on the other side. Additionally, the project was cathartic for Alan, helping him to further his healing from this lifetime. From start to finish, the process was an amazing experience that helped us to grow, and we both had a lot of fun. As Alan and I continue to work closely together, I look forward to eventually teaching the channeling method I use for writing. A significant jumping-off point for the story is my YouTube video, Why We Express Sexual Attraction Through Art and Creativity, posted on November 20, 2024. The link is in the description box below. The video includes a brief discussion of the sacral chakra, the energy center located a few inches below the navel. The sacral chakra governs creativity, sexuality, and the fundamental aspects of human life: relationships, family and children, the home, career and money, and the problems we encounter in those areas. Understanding the predominance of sacral chakra themes in our society is a very important topic I'll be developing in my ongoing work as a healer and teacher. Future books that will further explore this subject include Sacred Love, Sacred Sex, The Kachina Doll Theater, and The Blue Swan. Free fan fiction stories in this vein will include Mesmer's Rose and Colonel Brandon, Romance in India. Sacral chakra themes are on full display in writing Alan Rickman's autobiography, from the romance and sexual through lines to the recurring references to art, theater, and dance. The story structure we employed was Alan's idea. The repetition of masculine and feminine energy story structure was deliberate. The first part of the book explores masculine energy, which is evident in the mention of the film Die Hard, and how the formulaic story structure of movies and books is patterned after the male climax. The first part of the story also builds in that fashion. Then the structure of the end of the story switches to feminine energy. Feminine energy story structure is introduced during the discussion of the film The Winter Guest, and later repeated with the novel The Thornbirds. It's accentuated by the symbol of the round hot tub, chalice, George O'Keeffe's artwork, and the narrator's undetermined future left open for interpretation. While recently studying William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, I was impressed with the use of juxtaposition in this classic play. From the contrasts between characters to contrasts in language and verse styles. So I felt inspired to practice the technique in writing Alan Rickman's autobiography. The contrasts throughout the story are intentional, such as the initial setting changes from a public party to a private meeting at Alan's apartment, then from the social areas of his apartment to the privacy of his bedroom. There's a painting on his living room wall of two fish swimming in opposite directions, which is contrasted with a painting of two lovers in ecstasy on his bedroom wall. Serious conversations are sometimes juxtaposed with irreverent humor. The male chef at the restaurant performing with knives, a masculine symbol, is followed by a performance of female burlesque dancers. Burlesque and the theater of the absurd are compared. Then the fantasy world of theatrical performances is followed by a visit to the fantasy world of Harry Potter. The fantasy of Harry Potter leads to a discussion of how romance novels are also a form of fantasy. Subtly, writing Alan Rickman's autobiography is poking fun at itself as a fantasy here. Finally, the extensive immersion in fantasy is followed by a turn to the real-world realities of women today. Here, the narrator is forced to consider where she fits in and what her new focus as a writer will be. At the same time, Alan is struggling to find meaning in his life now that he's facing his mortality. The story culminates in the shattering of all notions of fantasy when Alan's death must be confronted. At this point, the ghostwriter accepts that it's time to move on from romance novels and write women's literature. Additionally, while she previously hadn't conceived of a life with marriage and children, she learns that she could have married Alan and raised a family with him. In the midst of her grief, she discovers she's carrying his child. The end of one life leads to the beginning of a new life. Where the real-life Alan shines through the story are the places where he expresses himself as an artist and mentor. Taking the ghostwriter under his wing, the fictional Alan helps her to own her power as a woman and reimagine her career, much like the real Alan helped countless people in this lifetime. If you're an aspiring writer, I encourage you to read widely in different genres, just as the living Alan had advised young actors to expand their horizons and become more well-rounded by visiting art galleries and taking part in a wide variety of experiences. I also encourage you to develop your intuition and practice your channeling ability. This story was crafted using a style of intuitive writing with Alan's input. Someone had asked me once for examples of what spirit guides can do for us here in the material world. Writing Alan Rickman's autobiography is an example of how books can be written with the assistance of spirit guides. Since I began publishing free online content in 2022, my primary message has been to develop a working relationship with Alan and your guides. They will help you achieve your goals if you talk to them and ask for their guidance. If you desire to write a book, Alan will help you. After a lifetime of providing support to people, he's now in a new life, continuing to do the same from the other side. When he died, he never left. That ultimately is what I hope readers take away from writing Alan Rickman's autobiography. Recommended reading. Books I read that influenced the writing of this story. First, Writing on the Intuitive Side of the Brain by Lauren Sapala, writing coach for intuitive, highly sensitive people. Lauren's work has been a godsend to me for the past 5 years while studying the writing craft. I highly recommend this book to better understand where channeled writing comes from and to cultivate a stronger relationship with your intuition. From the book description on Amazon.com, quote, "Figuring out the creative process can be a difficult challenge for writers, especially writers with an intuitive temperament. Highly intuitive people tend to be neurodiverse in a way that blocks them from working in a straight line. And so when highly intuitive writers try to use plotting and planning in their writing process, it usually ends in disaster. These types of writers frequently struggle with various forms of writer's block and blame themselves when they can't ever seem to get a creative project off the ground. However, the problem is not the writer, it's the process. After over a decade of coaching and teaching these kinds of writers, Lauren Sapala developed a new way for writers to approach their relationship with their own creativity, which is through an intuitive writing process," unquote. Next, Sweet Baby Lover, A True Story of Love, Death, and Hope by Jewel Kuchera, memoirist and story structure coach. I absolutely love this book. I read it in a couple of sittings. Of all the books on this list, Jules' memoir was perhaps the most significant source of creative inspiration for writing Alan Rickman's autobiography. From the book description on Amazon.com, quote, Jewel vows she'll never again give her heart to a man who will only use it against her. Love is an illusion that ends in pain. Instead, she devotes herself to her work as a corporate executive and to creating a beautiful nest for herself. Her Chicago home is brick, the color of butterscotch. The walls are covered with her own colorful paintings, Jewel's way of staking her claim on her home and her life. But the building needs work, and she hires a friend of a friend for the project. Trent Price is divorced with not much more than a high school diploma, a weathered Chevy truck, and a 10-year-old daughter in Michigan. His torso, slashed with scars, looks to have endured a brutal accident, but there is even greater damage within. As she watches Trent work, feelings buried years ago come to life. This tender memoir, plainly told, is perfect for fans of the year of magical thinking. With mature situations and language, it is one woman's honest account of her remarkable journey to love, through loss, and at last to peace, unquote. Next, I'm mostly here to enjoy myself. One Woman's Pursuit of Pleasure in Paris by Glenys McNichol, feminist writer. If you choose to read this unusual memoir, I think its influence on writing Alan Rickman's autobiography will be obvious. My favorite part of the book is the author's visit to the Louvre. As she shares her observations of the countless paintings of nude women on the walls, she wonders what the artists and their subjects might have been thinking at the time the paintings were made. I visited the Louvre about 15 years ago, so I can relate to Glenys's experience. From the book description on Amazon.com, quote, after New York City emptied out in March 2020, Glenys McNichol, aged 46, unmarried with no children, spent 16 months alone in her tiny Manhattan apartment. The isolation was punishing. Leaving felt less like a risk than a necessity. The weeks in Paris are filled with friendship and food and sex. There is dancing on the Seine, a plethora of gooey cheese, midnight bike rides through empty Paris, handsome men, afternoons wandering through the empty Louvre, nighttime swimming in the ocean off a French island, and yes, plenty of nudity. I'm mostly here to enjoy myself as an intimate, insightful, powerful, and endlessly pleasurable memoir of an intensely lived experience. McNichol is determined to document the beauty, excess, and triumph of a life that does not require permission, unquote. Next, The Thornbirds by Maureen McCullough, Australian novelist. While reading this 1977 best-selling novel, the feminine energy story structure leaped off the pages at me. The compelling elements of an epic, multi-generational saga, family drama, forbidden love, age gap romance, ambition, and sacrifice made this book a page-turner I couldn't put down. The story will inspire me for years to come. And if you haven't seen it, the Emmy Award-winning 1983 TV miniseries shouldn't be missed. From the book description on Amazon.com, quote, a chronicle of 3 generations of Clearys, an indomitable clan of ranchers, carving lives from a beautiful hard land while contending with the bitterness, frailty, and secrets that penetrate their family. It is a poignant love story, a powerful epic of struggle and sacrifice, a celebration of individuality and spirit. Most of all, it is the story of the Clearys' only daughter, Meggie, and the haunted priest, Father Ralph de Brickassard, and the intense joining of 2 hearts and souls over a lifetime, a relationship that dangerously oversteps sacred boundaries of ethics and dogma, unquote. Next, Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, classic playwright. As I stated above, Shakespeare's use of juxtaposition in this play was a major source of inspiration. From the book description on Amazon.com, quote, one of Shakespeare's most popular and accessible plays, Romeo and Juliet tells the story of 2 star-crossed lovers and the unhappy fate that befell them as a result of a long and bitter feud between their families. The play contains some of Shakespeare's most beautiful and lyrical love poetry and is perhaps the finest celebration of the joys of young love ever written, unquote. And last but not least, the initial inspiration for writing Alan Rickman's autobiography, Madly Deeply, The Diaries of Alan Rickman. All right, this concludes my reading of Writing Alan Rickman's Autobiography, a fan fiction romance. The print version is available for free on Wattpad.com. Visit my website, sonyawhitejaguar.com, for more information about my free books. Then join me on Christmas Eve for a holiday treat from Alan on a special episode of White Jaguar Wednesdays. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, so you'll be notified when that video is posted. You can also sign up for my newsletter on my website and get notified that way. I send out newsletters twice a month. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.